Hello, my name is Eric Beard. I'm offering a discussion summary of the PRF 711W2 in Module 4 for the CalU course that I'm teaching right now through the California University of Pennsylvania. If you'd like any more information on CalU's online or physical programs, it's a bricks and mortar university that's been around since 1852. It's a fully accredited university. They have bachelor's and master's programs, particularly online. You can go to calu.edu. If you'd like more information on this approach to personal training, this is a segment that touches on personal training information as well as corrective exercise, and you can go to nasm.org for more information on that. As far as the discussion goes, we use this subject right here, and I just transpose a grid in front of it here to take a look at the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints to look for movement compensations. Also put some notes down. So the discussion was to find the impairments and then create a corrective exercise strategy once you have identified probable overactive and underactive muscles. Starting from the feet and moving up, you can notice that both feet are turned out. The right one's probably turned out more so than the other. If you look at the knee in relation to each ankle, that right knee is moved inwards. And if you look at that right hip, the right portion of the lumbopelvic hip complex, it's shifted out to the right. You can also notice some potential lateral flexion of the lumbar spine. So if you look at that right side of the kinetic chain, the foot's out, we're pronating, the knee is in, the femur is adducting, internally rotating, and flexing, and then we've got some abduction of the hip and some lateral flexion of the spine. You can notice here that one hand is higher than the other, suggesting some potential elevation on the right side, or potentially even some restriction latissimus dorsi and any of the shoulder extensors on that side. This is the view that I gave you, but if we want to go ahead and take a peek at the next screen, it might be a little bit easier for you to see. So if we look at the left picture, the ideal picture, this is after this athlete has received some personal training and used some of the concepts that we have set up here in the textbook. Her squat looks much better. So if we look at the feet, knees, pelvis is more square, shoulders, hands, you can still see there's definitely still some tightness in the upper extremity, but it looks a lot better. So this is the posterior view of the picture I gave you to work with. You can still see both feet are turned out. You can see that you have some pronation, more so on that right side. You can really notice that shift to the right. I know that little swoosh here in the shirt might give you a little bit of an illusion, but there is some lateral flexion of that lumbar spine. You can see that the left arm is up higher on this side, and there's definitely some elevation over here. So if we have that latissimus dorsi, which is going to originate here through the sacrum, the thoracolumbar fascia, the crest of the ilium, all 5 lumbar vertebrae, and anywhere between T11 and T12 to the inferior angle of the scapula, all the way up here to the intertubercular groove of the humerus. This can cause dysfunction in the shoulder complex as well as through the lumbopelvic hip complex. So we definitely want to look at some dysfunction here in the lat through that movement compensation. The rest will break down on the next page. So the compensation, yes, the feet are turning out, yes, the right knee is moving in, but it's really called an asymmetrical weight shift, or it's accommodation. So if we look at the left side of the body, we see some different things happening. We almost have some abduction on that left femur. What muscles can abduct the femur? The piriformis, the bicep femoris, specifically the long head, and the glute medius, particularly those anterior fibers of glute medius. You could throw glute minimus in there as well. You could also look at the TFL being overactive, causing some abduction of that left femur. The left foot is turned out, so any of the muscles that are going to turn the left foot out, like the gastroc complex, particularly the lateral head of the gastroc, as well as the short head of the bicep femoris, and the TFL, as we'd mentioned, those can cause that lower extremity to externally rotate in a closed chain position. Those muscles could all be potentially overactive. Now, if the femur is abducting, then the adductors are not doing their work. Now, this could be something that's learned. Perhaps they don't know how to squat. It could be muscular imbalances, or it could be a joint restriction. It's very possible, if we looked here on the left side, that there is a restriction at that left foot and ankle. She can't dorsiflex, so she continues to sink down and collapses and pronates. That's not what turns out to be the case with this particular athlete, where her primary weakness was through the glute medius and glute max complex. She had tight hip flexors and weak glutes on that right side was the driver for this as she went through further assessments and actually went through some corrective strategies. So that's what's happening on the left side of the body from the waist down. If we look at the right side, if we're looking at adduction of the femur, we look at the adductor complex, particularly what we see in EMG studies is we see adductor magnus being particularly active as it's shortened in the frontal plane and in the transverse plane, it actually gets a little bit lengthened. So there's some aggravation or eccentric activity in adductor magnus. We also see the TFL being overactive, as the TFL in a closed chain position can cause some adduction of the femur. We could look at the short head of the bicep femoris as well, and a closed chain position could drive the knee inwards. And again, we can look down to lower extremity and we see that right foot. The right foot is turned out. Could be a restriction sagittal plane dorsiflexion, including the soleus and the gastroc, or it could just be the foot more turning out with the lateral gastrocnemius and then the short head of bicep femoris and TFL, as I'd mentioned. We would definitely be looking at some weakness in the abductors, the posterior fibers of glute medius and glute minimus, as well as glute maximus. Now, is this something that's learned? Is this a true joint mobility issue where she has a restriction or decreased posterior glide of her talus? Does she have a lumbar vertebrae that's out of alignment or restricted sacroiliac joint? Potentially. It could be all of those things. But what we found with this particular individual is there were muscular imbalances, and going through a corrective exercise process helped to improve her movement patterns. Sample processes, we would look at the 4-step corrective exercise process. Now, even though this course doesn't focus primarily on corrective exercise, what I want you to be able to do is to look at the 4-step process and see how it might show up in just the regular CPT information. So on the top left-hand side, we do some self-myofascial release, or go through inhibition, which is step number 1. So we would decrease overactivity of any muscle spindle fibers, work on reducing adhesions and enhancing tissue quality. Then we would go to lengthening. We could do a static stretch like the kneeling hip flexor stretch. This is going to be wonderful to target the TFL. We can get a little bit of that vastus lateralis, that fascial complex that's going to address the lats all the way down into the knee and the IT band. So this is going to be wonderful to go ahead and help balance out that lateral component for this athlete that we've seen. And then we'd want to move on to some activation. So step number 1, inhibition. Step number 2, lengthening. And then step number 3, activation. So we look here at something like an isolated glute medius exercise or glute maximus exercise, and then once we've activated the inhibited muscle that's not firing, either because it doesn't have the neurological connection, or perhaps the hip flexors are causing reciprocal inhibition to the hip extensors, we just get that activation. We wake the muscle up, we work on the intramuscular coordination, INTRA, teaching that muscle to shorten, lengthen, and isometrically stabilize on its own. Then we come down here to a more integrated exercise like a squat to row, or a single leg balance, or a single leg squat if she was strong enough or had the functional capacity to do so. But here we're teaching how to dorsiflex, flex the knee, flex the hip, knee, and ankle with good alignment, challenge the core stabilizers, and work with those and work on intermuscular coordination. So teaching all the muscles around the lower extremity all the way through the entire kinetic chain to work in unison. Remember, movements aren't just shortening of muscles, they're also lengthening and stabilization, and we're requiring joints to move in multiple planes at multiple times when we're looking at complex movements like something like walking or running. So with this process, we've highlighted some of the movement impairments we've seen. We've talked about some of the probable overactive and probable underactive muscles, and we've offered a potential solution. This strategy that we're showing here would take somewhere around 5 minutes that someone could do at the beginning of the workout. Let me get that out of the screen for you. I'm sorry about that. And if we were just working off the certified personal trainer information, the only thing that's really different is we would take out this activation. So this self-myofascial release or foam rolling, the static stretching, those are parts of a warm-up. In place here, you might see something like a plank or a quadruped, opposite arm and leg raise. You might see something like a single leg balance, and then you might see the integration exercise. You might see that somewhere in the resistance training. So these same principles are built into the certified personal trainer information. When we look at the corrective exercise information, it's a bit more specific. We're using that laser beam focus to go in as opposed to more the shotgun approach. So hopefully this has been helpful to go ahead and take you through that discussion that we saw. I saw many great answers. I saw wonderful references. I saw some good questions and interactions. So the key components are look at the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints: feet, knees, hips, shoulders, head. Watch someone move. If they can't hold ideal alignment of those 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, then it means that they A, don't know what to do, B, can't do it because the joint is restricted, or C, there's a muscular imbalance, or D, all of the above. In this instance, there was a muscular imbalance. We worked with this particular athlete to go ahead and improve the extensibility of our hip flexor complex on the right side. We worked on activation of the glutes on the right side, particularly glute medius, and then integrated it in together and had some good results. A friend of mine was actually her trainer and worked with her, so I've got some insight onto what happened with this athlete. But thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Eric Beard, and I hope you have a wonderful day.